Hey everyone, it's Pat and Allie from Seattle Coffee Gear. We're here today to have another conversation about coffee from our homes with each other and with you. So today we're talking about kind of how you start your specialty coffee, craft coffee journey from home. If you go all the way and buy a like a
Okay.
Eureka Atom and Rocket R58 and have a full on like prosumer cafe on your countertop, or if you start with something like a Barista Express or
Okay.
something like that,
Yeah.
and sort of the benefits of both,
hmm
which is something that we think a lot about here, um, and talk a lot about and write a
Yeah.
lot about.
Yeah. People always want to know that too, like when I talk to customers about like different machines, they always want to know like what's the difference? Like what do you get for your money and all of that stuff too. So I think, that's something we can go over as well. Do you
Yeah,
want do you want to kind of like maybe talk about maybe we'll split it up first, talk about like why you would choose a simple setup and
sure.
like value, and then we can talk about, going up from there.
Yeah, so I think the starting at a it's a lot of people I think have a bit of a missed perception of what I don't even want to use the term low end. I want to say more like affordable
Entry
entry
level.
level equipment is.
Yeah.
There's certainly some value to be had in starting really small and getting like the cheapest pressurized portafilter brewing espresso
Yeah.
machine that you can, to see if you even like the style of coffee. But the thing is, the reality of espresso in particular is there's kind of a floor to what's going to provide a decent cup of coffee and a good starting platform to learn from.
Yeah.
And I usually think of that as somewhere around like a Barista Express or something like Bravo also has the Bambino, that kind of a thing. And, you kind of in that realm get into some machines too that are things like the Sylvia are like
Mhm.
can also last you a long time and stuff. But that sort of under $1,000 level is not, it's entry level. It's definitely not like, well, you use this for a little while and then you get something else. I mean, it can last you years and years and years,
Yeah.
but that is those are machines that are sort of designed to be your first machine. They're not
Right.
really stabbing at that professional kind of feel and level of brewing.
Right. And I think like a lot of people who are looking for these like entry level machines, some of the things that I tell them is like it's going to be a way for you to one get used to making your self espresso because it's a pretty big learning curve if you've never done it
Yep.
before. Um and a lot of the entry level machines keep that in mind, and so they make it easier for you to get a good cup of coffee.
Yep.
Um whereas like not all the time, because there's definitely a lot of machines that just add convenience as you go up in price. But if you're talking about like actual equipment as it goes up towards like more professional commercial, you get more control, but that might not always be something you want
Totally.
when you're starting.
I think if you can look at it like I like to look at it as so there's like two when you buy something like a Barista Express, it's going to come with two kinds of baskets for the portafilter, which is going to be a pressurized basket and an unpressurized basket. And one of those, basically, the difference between those is that the pressurized basket's going to kind of compensate for less dialed in grind because
Mhm.
it provides some pressure in the basket for the water to help slow down extraction that you
Yeah.
might get from a grind that's a little too coarse. Might not be able to get that kind of extraction out of an unpressurized filter that doesn't have that built-in back pressure.
Exactly. And like I always compare a pressurized basket, and some people may not like this, but honestly it's the best comparison, like training wheels on a bicycle,
Sure.
because it makes it more even, more balanced, like you have a little bit of flexibility there, but it's going to keep you in that range. It's going to keep
Right.
you going.
And you can kind of compare it to like driving an automatic transmission car to a manual transmission car too, to a degree, in that like with a pressurized basket you can kind of push the button and it'll go. And your grind has to be in the realm of espresso. Still, you can't put French press grounds in a pressurized basket and get good coffee. But I think the mistake is maybe a strong word. But one of the things that I hear from people is they just think pressurized basket, lower quality coffee. So I got to get a machine that has an unpressurized basket to start so that I'm getting the best coffee. And that can be a bit of whenever I hear from people who are having trouble with their their Breville machines or any of their kind of entry level machines, I always say first thing you should do if you're having trouble, switch to your pressurized basket.
Totally.
Focus on that, learn how to get a good shot from that, and then think about swapping that basket out. And
go ahead.
The reason I bring it up is it seems like we're talking a lot about it is because it's kind of a core, like, are you going to learn from this machine, or is it a machine that kind of expects you to already have some knowledge on how to use it?
Yeah, that's a really good way to put that. And the pressurized basket just makes it so much easier. And if you're new to espresso, new to this whole experience, you're going to need to get used to like just using the machine first. So it just makes it easier on you to have that pressurized basket. And then once you get more familiar with preparing, the style, just even functioning of the machine, and you have a little bit more time to learn and move up to that next like level, then you can switch to your unpressurized or, get a little bit more picky with the way that you're dialing in.
Yeah, and those machines really allow for a lot of upgrade potential and the ability to kind of grow and make decisions about what you're going to upgrade next. Because so much of it is your grinder. That's like, I think someone once told me that they think of it as like 80% of your espresso setup should be your grinder. Like it's a lot more important. The grinder's a lot more important than the machine. Which I don't know. I think they're pretty equally important personally, but I think it's a good. I bring it up because it's a good way to think about it when you're first starting out, because I think a lot of people don't put enough emphasis on their grinder when they're starting out.
That's super true, because like it comes from the whole concept of like, cheap grinders and just thinking like, oh, all I need is to crush the coffee up, right?
Right.
But you really need to think of it more of like preparing like food or something like that if you're cooking.
Totally.
It's a valuable part of that. And like people ask me a lot, and I never say it's more important, because if you get like the best grinder out there in a crappy machine, like you're still not going to get good espresso.
Yeah.
They need to be kind of a good pair.
Right.
And so I always recommend people to just like think about that when you're budgeting for your espresso setup as well. Especially if you're going to be going, say we kept talking about the Barista Express, but say we're talking about something like the Sylvia, which is another entry-level machine, but that one's going to be pickier about the grind.
Totally.
Because it doesn't have that pressurized basket.
Right. And because the Sylvia is a great example of a machine that you kind of have to, and it's a good segue into talking a bit more about like starting with a more professional machine, because it is a machine that you kind of have to learn to work with. It has its quirks. And so the one thing that I don't like about the all-in-ones, like the Barista Express, it's a really good starter machine, but because it combines the two, you do kind of miss that, like, well, you can totally upgrade your grinder and then use a different grinder with the espresso machine in that unit, but it does kind of, it's hard to like break it up and upgrade and kind of climb the ladder, of like, now I'm getting a grinder that's a little more than my machine needs, and now I'm getting a machine that maybe could use a slightly better grinder. But the Sylvia is a good example of a machine that you're sort of getting into that, like, starting to go big from the start thing, which I actually think, despite everything we just said, fits a certain kind of user if you have the right expectations in mind going in.
Totally. And it's like there's certain qualities you just need to be prepared for that, because there's different levels of people who want to be invested in this, right? And so like you just like your cup of coffee and you want something to be convenient, that's like Barista Express Zone. But if say you like coffee, like, and you're interested in it and you want to spend a little bit of time and you don't mind putting a little bit more effort up front, a Sylvia is gonna, last you longer. And be something that you can continue to have for a longer period of time,
And
but you keep some of that user friendliness.
and I think that comes into play too with stuff like when you start talking about things like Rocket, which
Mhm.
is I wouldn't tell someone if they're buying their first espresso machine and they say, I love the way the Apartamento looks. I really want that machine, I think. Can you recommend a good grinder? I'm not going to say you shouldn't buy that machine because it is a machine. There's no reason you can't learn. I mean, lots of people learn to drive cars with a manual transmission, you know? Um,
Yeah.
but you just have to be ready to put a little bit more patience and practice into it. And I think another core thing for really any level of espresso brewing, whether it's entry level machines or whether you start with something that's more expensive, that's sort of a more professional machine or prosumer machine is what I should say. The You're gonna have to be willing to spend some time kind of researching and learning too. We get questions and we're always happy to help people, of course, but I personally will get questions sometimes that is like, I can't seem to get my espresso tasting good on my like Sylvia or Apartamento or whatever the machine is. Can
Hmm.
you help? And it's like, I'm happy to help, but actually, what you should just do is exercise some of that ability to do that research, because you're going to get a lot of different answers from different people on what you should be doing, and you kind of have to put that all together
Right.
and work on a lot of different techniques and practice. And you're going to waste some coffee early on. You're going to get frustrated at times. It's just the way that it goes. But then eventually you're going to come out of it with so much knowledge and ability that
Yeah.
it's fun.
And it's really rewarding
Yeah.
too whenever you get, like, say when you get your first like great espresso, you're like, dang, like I did that,
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
And
Absolutely.
they do have the potential to make even better coffee, with the more options you go. It's just you have to figure out your investment level personally, like not just like money wise, because obviously that's a whole nother topic,
Right.
but just in like yourself, like the espresso machine I pick out is probably going to be a lot different than what most of our consumers pick out,
Yeah.
depending. Because I'm a big coffee nerd, right? So I want to be able to adjust and do all the little things and
Right.
do all that, but that's not for everyone.
Right. And I think sort of the cap on that is we were talking kind of specifically about semi-automatic espresso machines,
Yeah,
but
super.
you can totally go the other route and invest in something that's like a super automatic machine where
Mhm.
you're pushing a button and it's making your coffee. And there's a whole other conversation there about like different levels of value and cost. Like
Associated.
a machine like the Carina is the value there is really, really strong because it's really affordable and you're getting immediately into making coffee with like very simple prep and button presses and stuff like that. And then there's on the other end, you have stuff like the Excelsis that is much more expensive. And it's kind of gets back to that taste thing when you're talking about super autos. I personally don't. What I like about the Excelsis is the milk steaming capabilities that it has.
Mhm.
The options that it has for different kinds of coffee don't really matter to me as much. If it was just if I'm just going to drink straight shots of espresso, frankly, I don't really care what super auto it is doing the pulling personally. But when you start getting into like with those machines, it's more about like what kind of milk drinks do you want to make? What kind of
Yeah.
options do you want to have for volume? The
And
cleaning and everything like that.
that's a convenience level option as well. Like the Carina is going to be a little bit more hands-on. Like you're going to have to steam your own milk.
Yeah.
Where on the Excelsis, they have like a little slide bar so you can choose. I like this amount of milk or
Right.
this amount of milk. Um, so I think a lot of that goes into the pricing and the the different categories of those super autos too, because I usually say if you're simple, you kind of know what you're doing, or you just want something that's going to be solid, easy, not that involved, Carina, right? But if you like a lot of interface options. If you like a lot of options, pardon me, the Excelsis actually has some more like temperature
Yeah.
options in there, volume, all that kind of stuff. Like if you want to have convenience and options, that's what you kind of get as you go up in the super auto range.
And so much of it is budget setting. When you're talking about budget setting for drip brewing and for pour over and for semi-automatic, it's kind of like setting your first budget is actually a conversation because of all the stuff that we talked about before, which all maps fairly directly to other brew methods too that are a little more involved. Where it's like, well, do you want to go big budget and also have to learn a lot more, or do you want to start a little smaller and kind of grow? Whereas with super autos, it's much more like setting your budget is really about what feature set you're desiring. It's not, there's not necessarily a learning curve beyond other stuff to like using the Excelsis, for example.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
That's pretty right on.
Yeah. So as usual, if you have questions or comments, please let us know. And we'll be back with more videos like this soon. Make sure you like and subscribe this one to get the next one.
Bye guys.
Yeah. See ya.